Tell me a story.
What kind of story?
A sad one.
Why sad?
Why not?
What else?
Make it from a long time ago.
Using angel time or human time?
Human.
Okay. In 1422, Eleanor, a lady in waiting, was in love with her lady's husband. He was smart and charming and third in line for the throne. He also had a huge collection of manuscripts, and the quick-minded Eleanor loved to read. Although waiting was difficult, she tried to be patient, hoping that the Duke of Humphrey would notice her. His wife, Lady Jacqueline, had lands and wealth in France, so she wasn't going to be that easy for the Duke to give up. How's that so far?
Go on.
This Duke that Eleanor longed for was the youngest brother of King Henry V.
Henry V had brothers?
He had two. Eleanor prayed nightly for him to notice her, and she was passionate and full of life. How could he not eventually see her shine above all the other women in the court? However, since it was medieval times, nothing happened quickly in those days, except for conception.
Being that patient is hard to imagine.
One day, after 3 years of waiting, the Duke returned from a trip to France, and all of Eleanor's patience paid off. "I want you," he said.
Nice. It's good to be wanted.
Humphrey meant what he said. Eleanor became his mistress. It took another 3 years, but he annulled his marriage to Lady Jacqueline and took Eleanor as his wife. After another 9 years...
9 years?
Yes, 9 earthly years. I'm only using human time here.
Why 9 years?
Because nothing happens quickly in medieval time, remember?
Right.
Paperwork had to go back and forth between the Holy See and here. That slowed things down.
Uh-huh.
So after 9 years, he made her the first Duchess of Gloucester, granting her the royal robes. During this time, the Duke and Duchess were the center of the court. The Duke built a palace for them to entertain in Greenwich, and life was grand. Now listen. They were deeply in love. The beautiful Eleanor had only one trouble. She couldn't seem to conceive. Luckily, she had a group of advisors to help with such matters. She consulted astrologers Thomas Sothel and Roger Bolingbroke, both of whom held positions in court. And in secret, she visited Marjorie Jourdemain, who was nicknamed the Witch of Eye. She gave Eleanor potions to help her conceive.
Nice touch, adding witch.
But the patience that served Eleanor in earlier times wore down as she longed for a greater role in life. A child, a kingdom, something over which she could tend and nurture. When months turned into years and no child appeared, desire seized her. She returned to her advisors and said, "If I am not to have a child, then am I at least to have a kingdom?" Henry V had died, but Humphrey's older brother and Henry's own 9-month-old son, the heir apparent, were ahead in line for the throne. She waited and waited.
Is this a story about patience?
Wait and see. After a few years, she finally went back to the astrologers and asked the same question. She called on the witch and asked her to divine the future. Together, the astrologers and the witch predicted that the young king would suffer a life-threatening illness in the summer of 1441. By this time, the Duke of Bedford had died.
Who?
The middle brother. So Eleanor at last would be queen, and her husband would be king. She only had to wait a little longer, and then her son would shine over the kingdom. But word of this ambition found the young king's advisors. You know, to predict the death of the monarch was treason.
Sure.
The prophecy made the young King Henry anxious. He was sensitive, you know.
No, I didn't know.
Yes, he often lost his mind later in life for great stretches of time. And so Humphrey, once so in love with his wife, was also distraught. His wife had instigated the rumors of his king and nephew's death.
He was in a bad spot.
He said, "This time you went too far."
Not good.
No. Eleanor was arrested in the night and taken to the Tower. She was tried. The Duke of Humphrey did not come to her aid, and he didn't stand by her side. In fact, he'd already chosen his next mistress, and she was carrying his child.
Very sad.
Eleanor pleaded innocent to all charges, but admitted to having taken potions from Marjorie Jourdemain to help her get pregnant. That one admission was all. Eleanor was found guilty of necromancy. In her downfall, her friends and advisors went with her. Sothel perished waiting for his trial in the dank shadows of the Tower of London. Bolingbroke, despite his popularity, was hanged and then drawn and quartered.
Ugh.
And Marjorie, the Witch of Eye, was burned at the stake.
Oh, no.
Only Eleanor's life was spared, but she was punished. She was forced to divorce the Duke.
They could do that back then?
They could. Later, I'll tell you the story about Henry VIII.
I already know that one.
So the Duke called his wife a sorceress, and she was forced to walk the streets of London to broadcast her shame. Then she was imprisoned at Chester Castle, then at Kenilworth Castle. After 3 years, she was moved to the Isle of Man. In another 3 years, she was sentenced to Beaumaris Castle in Anglesley.
Where are these places?
Exactly. She waited another 3 years to die.
All these threes.
It's a thing.
Why?
You'll have to wait a while for that answer, too.
Cyrus, did you know Swedenborg?
Yeah, I ran into him a couple of times. He spent a lot of time in London.
What was he like?
Well, a little bit like Henry VI, but we'll save that for another story.
Did you know Eleanor?
I did. She had the silkiest hair I ever touched.